Good morning and welcome to this morning's webinar hosted by Data Capture Solutions by myself, James Howlett, and our main presenter for the morning, Dean Francis. The webinar, Adopting Paper-Lite Strategy in the Legal Sector, expected to take place over about the next half an hour or so. And the first thing I should tell you is that there will be an opportunity to ask questions using the questions box, which you will see on the right-hand side of your screen. I'm going to be monitoring that, and then I'll deal with those questions at the end after the main bit of the presentation presented by Dean. You'll also hear from me partway through because Dean's actually going to encourage you to participate in a brief poll about a third of the way through. So you'll hear from me at that point when we do that. So adopting Paper-Lite strategy in the legal sector, it's something that Dean is very familiar with, and we appreciate you giving up the time this morning, Dean, to do that. And so without further ado, let me hand over to Dean. Good morning.
Good morning, James. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your schedule to attend this webinar around the Paper-Lite strategy in the legal sector. Hopefully you can see this image, and many of you may be familiar with this image on your screen. We come across this fairly commonly when speaking with customers, certainly recently and over the past number of years. It is very much a problem at the moment, trying to deal with this paper, managing it properly and effectively around the law firm is becoming more and more of a struggle. So we're working closely with law firms now, and it seems to be a bit of a drive in this sector to start digitising and becoming a more paper-light environment. So to this end, over the next half an hour, we'll cover some alternative and maybe more effective ways of sharing, and we'll share these experiences that we've done with other projects and other customers, and we'll have the opportunity, as James mentioned, to go through some questions at the end. So a little bit on the agenda, what we'll cover in the next half an hour, just in general where firms currently sit, whether they're very much dealing with paper, paperless, which is very difficult to achieve, or obviously a more paper-light environment, and the number of stages that people are sitting at the scanning process and capturing of images. At that point, as James mentioned, we will run a very quick poll as to where you think you sit in line with these strategies. And then we'll come on to some of the reasons why law firms are struggling to get to a more digital and streamlined process, some ideas around how we can deliver against these problems, a quick case study, and some real benefits, and then the conclusion and on to some questions. So currently, where do you sit as an organisation from the very paper-intensive environment, loads of paper generally being stored on-premise. In many cases, a lot of law firms are in quite expensive areas, so you're effectively paying to store this paper on floor space, which could be taken up by more valuable resource and generally more revenue generating activities. And we do see this a lot of time, and people are pushing paper around from floor to floor, and then obviously off-site storage, again where it's maintained certainly for long periods, 7, 10 years or maybe longer. And then there's the other extreme, which generally is probably, as we feel, is unrealistic utopia, an entirely paperless office. And I know that's been a mantra that's been used for many years now, being paperless, but we have seen it's probably unrealistic. In that case, what we are looking at, and again the more common phrase these days is paper-light. So what we're saying is you can't always take the paper out of the process, and that's for a number of reasons. Some departments generally do need the paper, and it's just easier to work from the paper environment. And again, it might be depending on the department or the process that they're dealing with. Some people just like the feel of the paper, and then there's some documents that generally just need to be passed around, maybe originals. So there's all sorts of different issues around becoming more paper-light. Where we're really trying to aim this, and where law firms are trying to get to, though, is capture information and communication. And it's not just paper. That does generate itself into other document formats such as web portals, emails and attachments, and dare I say in some cases maybe faxes. Some of you may still have fax machines out that are generating hard copies, or again maybe pushed into electronic PDF formats. So the idea is really to capture this information as soon as it arrives into the firm. The ability to capture this information, digitize it, classify and validate information, and push that into the back-end systems. Now, whether the documents then follow on for certain individuals, certain teams or departments, in some cases that is still acceptable, but it's about minimizing the amount of paper that's being passed across the business, and in many cases across multiple offices. There's also the benefit of capturing information up front to streamline the process and maybe add notifications of when urgent documents have arrived into the firm. Maybe it's a complaint, or maybe there's some time-sensitive documents. So it's about delivering the content around the firm where it's needed quickly and effectively. There is also a question that we're asked many times, is about the back scanning of documents. So the archive files, even the files that are on premise, or even the ones that are in deeper storage. And again, there's a balance of what needs to be captured and digitized and brought up to date, as opposed to what we call as a day forward scanning. So this means, do we put a stake in the ground, forget the archive in many respects, and from the point moving forward we start digitizing files and records moving forward? So we're not adding to the problem, adding to the management of the paper, and adding certainly to the archives. We have a number of firms that are already doing scanning, or saying that we are capturing documents. But again, where is that responsibility for the scanning? Not many organisations we come across are scanning at the mailroom, so at the very first point that the paper hits the business. And again, is it a planned event or a scheduled event where people, or is it a very much performed ad hoc? And again, from previous experience, the actual paper content goes deep into the firm, and then a decision is made either by a fee earner or administrative staff at that point whether that document should or should not be scanned. So at that point there's no actual standardisation of what should and what shouldn't be scanned in. The point is, if we captured everything, then again this is not so much of a concern. People are scanning again, but there's very much a manually intensive process behind that, where they're keying of information, so keying of matter numbers, keying of names and addresses, document classifications, and again feeding in other metadata into the case management system. So a lot of time is taken up in carrying out these processes, and again that could be used for more revenue generating activities or more customer services led activities. And again, there are also the issues around documents that are actually received electronically in the first instance. And because there's no way of capturing the central matter file or linking everything together, in some cases they're again printed out and the hard copy is then added to the matter file, the central hard copy matter file. Again, we then had problems around the management and the storage of that moving forward. So really what we want to do is, if we can keep it electronic, deliver that into and only print it out if it's indeed necessary. So coming on some more common challenges, again there's either little or no scanning being done and carried out at the moment, so how do we get over those barriers and start getting some of that digitized? And again, it's whether that's the legacy information is scanned or there's a stake in the ground and moving forward. Some firms are scanning at the end of the process, which is still good to have a copy, but again the real benefits is having the paperwork delivered to you electronically at the start of a process, where it can be accessed by a number of different people. Again, some documents need signatures, can then be scanned in, so that's not an issue. And there are obviously other documents which have either historical value or are more difficult to perhaps to capture and break up. Bound documents, for example, some of the full service lawyers, with documents such as wills, again, not always the easiest thing to capture and scan. And again, paper is still very much seen as the primary source of information. So where do you currently sit in the process? And we see this and break this down into four main areas at the moment. Currently there's still nothing being done. It's very much paper driven, and paper's being passed around the organisation. So it comes into the mailroom, it's either opened at that point, batched up, sent to team leaders and departments, or onto the recipient, where it's then dealt with manually. The next stage is ad hoc, and again, as I mentioned earlier, it's what documents do need to be captured, who decides that, is there any structure to what's captured, or is there any standardisation? But again, it's still good, and it's good to have some documents at least coming into the process, at least as a digital copy that can generally be shared. The next stage is a little bit more advanced, where we're capturing everything that comes in to the business, and there's a little bit more of a manual process. So images are being delivered to teams, and at that point, if there's either semi-automation, it's trying to capture maybe a barcode or some sort of relevant information, but predominantly a lot of it is still being manually keyed. Again, a lot of time taken up in doing that process. And as we said, a bit more about sort of more utopia is capture straight into the process. So documents are opened in the mailroom, put through scanners or brought in from email inboxes or folders, and rules are applied at this stage around, can we find a matter number or a case number? Can we find a name of a fee earner or a department? Who has it been sent from? Who is sending us this information? And can we validate this into our case management system, link that to a matter number or case reference, and automatically feed that to the people that need that information? So at this particular point, we would just like to just run a quick poll to see where you are across these four areas. So if I can hand back to James briefly.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Dean. So a poll will shortly be arriving. Well, you can see the general questions there, but on your screens now should be the quick poll. So what stage, given the stages that Dean has just briefly outlined for you there, the gradations to digitization and automation exists, where are you at, basically? Are you not scanning at all? Are you sending data right through from the start straight into your case management systems, or something in between? I shall give you about 20 or 30 seconds just to have a little think about that, and also to respond. We find it very, very, very interesting to carry this poll out, because it gives us a bit of a benchmark to to what sort of solutions should be pursued, and how people feel about that automation. So I think I can see most people have indeed voted. So I'm going to close the poll in a second, Dean, in about 5 seconds actually. So get them in if you haven't done and want to. Okay, poll closed, and if I hit share, we can now see. Dean.
Okay, thanks for that to everybody for participating. That's quite interesting. So there's less than 10% of people that are actually doing no scanning at all, which is good to see that there's some elements of scan and capture are being currently carried out. And obviously the two mid-tier points is what we would probably expect at this stage. So there is ad hoc scanning being carried out across the business, and obviously capturing of images, but with more manual processing. So I suppose the interesting point is that only 7% are really pushing straight into case management systems, which is where the main benefits are at the moment that we're experiencing with law firms. Okay, thank you for that poll. Just moving on. So these are a couple of stats again, and I'm sure you see these sort of stats all the time, but we just wanted to talk around a few of these. It's quite interesting that 86% of firms acknowledge that they would be more efficient with digital files instead of paper ones. I know that's nice to be able to see that, and again, it's how do you get to that stage where it's obviously a bit more effective to be working from a paper copy. So whether that will be out of the office, working from home, working from a client's office, having access to electronic information is so much easier. And 89% of firms credit success to have above average client servicing. And this is something that we are seeing on a more regular basis now, is about client retention and the customer experience of dealing with the firm. So if someone rings up asking for information, having that available to you at your fingertips, just doing a quick search for the electronic image and then being able to respond. And that's quite important now in any industry, not just the legal sector. 15% of firms obviously have identified the process, that clear benefit of digitisation. And obviously 48% of firms credit success to being technologically advanced. And we know law firms are technologically advanced in many instances, and things like case management and document management systems have been adopted many, many years ago. So it's just making use of those core systems and adding to those. On the last stat, the bottom right-hand corner, we found that only half of firms that digitise, they only digitise less than 25% of this correspondence that comes in. So again, whilst they are capturing information, it's only a smaller percentage that's actually being captured, which probably reflects in the poll about the ad hoc scanning, so half it's being ad hoc. Okay, so 80% of firms recognise the need to respond to the digital age as a critical component of their future strategy. So we know that this is something that people are looking to do, and 23% of firms are already making these changes. And from the poll, it would suggest that actually a few more may actually be further down that road than may be expected, so which is always good to see. So what are the barriers that are currently preventing firms from moving to full sort of Paper-Lite environments? And there's a number of different areas, and again, the one that we generally see is around the culture. The legal sector is a very paper-intensive sector by the nature of what it does, and it's just trying to take the paper file away and actually presenting that back in an electronic format. So that's always a big one, the re-education internally. But we find that generally that's driven by either a department or a division or an office that's keen to adopt electronic and the more Paper-Lite environment, and then the rest of the organisation just follows suit and sees the benefits. There are obviously comments about, it's just a fad, but again, I think we can clearly say that it's not a fad. More and more people are now realising that going to the digital age is where they need to be. And there's no doubt that legal work can be complicated, and the document types. So these are some challenges that we do see on a daily basis. So how also are the sort of challenges that are transitioning to digital, handling the logistics of documents. Predominantly, currently files are very much passed across the business in hard copy, and in some cases these need to be seen by team leaders and checked before they get passed on, which again can be done in an electronic format. So work can still be carried out, but team leaders can still be reviewing post should they need to. Adopting process change and one-off projects. Again, I think the latter part of adopting the process change is definitely one of the challenges. The younger, dare I say, lawyers coming out of law school tend to expect now that it should be electronic. They've been brought up with PCs and iPads. So again, there's a very young set of lawyers and that are coming through now and just expecting this to be the case. How do people manage inbound and outbound? Because obviously in many instances these are intrinsically linked. So again, they're seeing this as a challenge, but these are things that we can link up and kick off an outbound process based on information that's been received into the firm. Physical documents that are not property of the firm, so things such as wills, supporting information, ID documents. there are ways just capturing these and then pushing these through a different route so they can be returned to the right people. There's people seeing this high cost of excessive handling of documents, or multiple handling of documents. And again, but the keying of information and then passing it around, making copies in some cases is very, very expensive in handling paper documents. And again, prepping for maybe court submissions, putting in the hard copy documents, whereas electronically, these could be tagged to the files and printed off if need be. So again, the future of how to get there is a little bit clearer now than the multitude of problems. And it's certainly in one recent instance, there was one firm that had something like 5,000 A4 archive boxes on their premises. They're looking to expand and looking for additional offices. And when we looked at the amount of paper that's being stored, I think there was something along the lines of an additional 30 desks they could put in quite easily without having to move premises. So it was a case of, let's look at what we're doing now with the floor space, which again is quite expensive, when we could be putting revenue generating fee earners in that space. So moving on to the challenges now and how this can be dealt with, so by putting technology. So as soon as information and correspondence comes in various different formats, and as you will see down on sort of left-hand side of the screen now, paper is obviously the most prominent. Again, faxes are, because of signatories and wet signatories, still fax machines are used across firms. MFDs now are also rife across multiple floors in the firms. So again, maximising the investment in those. And things like now web portals, emails and attachments, and seems to be a bit of a drive now, more mobile device. So capturing information securely from a mobile or an iPad or an Android device and feeding that directly into the process. So when information now comes in and goes into the platform, we're looking to try and validate information. So what is this document? What classification of document? Once we've identified that, is then what information do we extract from it? And then we're looking up information against a case management system, such as matter number, case reference number, fee earner, and trying to link that directly to the case, pushing that to the person that needs it, notifying that there's something that needs to be worked on. And once these documents hit your back-end system, so the more common worksite, Proclaims, Peppermint, another application that seems to be more and more talked about in the sector, and feeding these information systems that you're investing in heavily, and again just enhancing that investment in those products. What we can do is, from the mailroom point of view, and again, we have some customers that have multiple back-end systems, again, is just look up against those systems and feed multiple different platforms from the point the information has arrived in from the mailroom. It doesn't necessarily just have to be the case management system. There could be other applications such as your finance system, so for invoices it could be your HR documents. So the same platform could be used to feed all documents coming in and feed multiple systems in the back end regardless of the process. So it's streamlining everything that comes into the business. So typically the technologies that are being used for this are the obvious one, which is the scanning and data extraction technologies. So where this information, either hard copy or electronic formats, validating that information. So are we confident that this has got a match? We know who this customer is. We have got a matter number. Does it meet our business rules before it can be passed through? Then we can workflow those documents to people. So whether they're by mobile to approve things before they move on a stage, and we can push that information that's verified into the matter file, into the back-end case management systems. And then once that's been dealt with, indexed correctly, that information can be stored securely and accessed from maybe your web, from home, from the office, or wherever it needs to be. Now that in a paper environment is very, very difficult if it's sat on your desk and you happen to be outside of the office. So we have a case study in particular with the firm that are scanning actually at the mailroom. Information is being captured as it comes in to the firm, both via email and stripping off attachments, and also from the hard copy documents that are being put through. There's a number of things that are happening when those documents are going through the system. We're predominantly a Kofax partner, which is the global market leader in this field for intelligent scan and capture. And we're looking up information that resides in your back-end systems to make sure we can do a match and we can verify that we've got the right information to store these documents correctly. So we're doing best possible matches against a number of different fields, and it could be matter numbers, as I said, fee earners, recipients, departments, and classification of document. And once we're confident this has all been verified, anything that's more than happy and is a perfect match will go automatically through the system. If not, we will push it into an exceptions queue for users to have a look at, make some changes, and then again just feed those documents through the rest of the process. So why are law firms generally looking at this sort of technology? Obviously cost reduction is the main thing in any project. It's never nice to have these days. It's all about cost reduction, cost efficiency. Some of the key ones are really driven by space. Expensive office space, cost per square metre, taken up by vast rows of information and documentation and filing cabinets. It's just driving that down and using that space more effectively. Lower handling costs, taking away the manual keying of information as it comes in, automating that, and then using that time to do more effective tasks. And the manual intervention of matching documents, pushing them into the back-end system, whereas currently in a manual process, it's very difficult to do any of that, and it's more about the digitisation which is really driving the needs. Compliance is definitely an issue. The ability to provide an audit trail from an electronic document as soon as it comes into the firm manually, apart from a date and time stamp on a document, it's very difficult to see who's had that, where it's gone, who's had access to it, who's opened information, whereas in an electronic environment that is so much easier, or very easy to do, and just track that right through into your case management systems. And improved customer data security. We do come across a number of firms that come the weekends, fee earners' cars come round to the rear of the building, files are being put into the boot, and they need to work them over a weekend or over an evening. And we're finding that law firms are coming to us saying our customers are not happy with that situation. We need ways of digitising this information so we can access it anywhere and give them the confidence that we're not taking files off site and eliminating any more data security or any breaches. And as one of the polls showed earlier about client satisfaction, this is really key now about client retention and providing a better quality of service, the ability to find information very quickly, respond to information, whether it's complaints, court dates, or whatever it might be, and also with reporting, the fact that you can capture every single piece of correspondence and then report what's coming in from where, what type of documents, what's taking its time to get through the process, how many touch points do we have on a particular document, is very, very useful information to the firm. And one big thing as well that, again, is never really talked about or asked for as a solution is we're looking for a business continuity or a disaster recovery solution. It's just now given that the fact that you can capture images as they came in and digitise, the IT departments can back these up, daily. So from a business continuity point of view, this is a real benefit. So apart from the standard technology capability that we mentioned around the capture platforms, workflow, and the storage of information, again, whether that's in a third-party application or your own content management repositories, case management repositories, there's other technologies now that complement these. that are really aiding the process. One in particular where there seems a little bit more feedback from firms now is the ability to be able to capture from a mobile device. So whether that is an Apple device or whether it's an Android, they want the opportunity that when they're in front of people to maybe capture documents there and then and feed them directly into the process. So there is capability now to use the very good cameras on the phones and iPads and these sort of things to capture these images, add some metadata if you wanted to at that point and feed that straight into the system. The other big benefit is around the security. So any images are held securely within the application until it gets a connection and sends that back into the back-end system. So no one can get access to those images, which relates to client data. And this is a real strong area now where we're being asked to advance technologies. We touched on also about analytics, and again, there's very graphical views now that can be gained to find out exactly what's happening in the business as far as communication, documentation. So real-time analysis and dashboards that can be presented to different team members or fee earners are really seeing what's coming into the business and how quickly it's being handled, or more importantly, where it's being stuck and what we need to do to address that. So we're nearly coming up to, I think, sort of about around half an hour, and just conscious that we may want to take a few questions from you. But in essence, really, the paperless environment is largely unachievable. So, but likewise, at the other end of the scale, dealing with paper is really not effective. And as the poll suggested, I think everyone's aware of that, and it's just at different stages of how you get to the more paper-light environment. But generally, it's about speed and efficiency and security for the customers. The ability for staff to be able to access information quickly. We did speak with one law firm last year, and they worked on average, and we downscaled that, but at least half an hour a day was spent by most staff looking and searching for hard copy documents. So even if you take 15 to 20 minutes a day, equate that right across the staff, it's a lot of time that's being wasted just moving paper and looking for paper. And obviously from the legal practice as a whole, profitability, more efficient, customer retention, and just being generally more efficient in the process. That's really sums up just very obviously briefly in half an hour what sort of law firms are doing and where they are at current stage of the process. So I think it's at this stage, James, if there's any questions, I mean obviously we're happy to take some offline or after the event, but if there's any at the moment, particular in particular that you'd like me to field?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, as Dean said, do feel free to get in touch with us offline if there's anything particularly in depth that you want to go into. But having said that, there is one question that's come in which we can deal with live, and it's actually quite a good one, actually, fairly relevant and crucial. When these projects of automation and digitization are deployed to legal firms, do they typically tend to favour big bang approach, which I think they mean doing everything all at once, just right, or do they prefer to phase it in gradually?
It's very rare that a big bang approach in any projects these days is the way forward. So we generally have found from the projects delivered to date and current projects that we're delivering is that the preference is to trial it somewhere. So let's deliver against the process or a team or a department and introduce these technologies so we can prove how it works. Generally there's particular teams that maybe are more looking for a digital environment. So again, we work in those closely with those and deliver that. So yeah, the big bang approach it doesn't really happen. It is really around what can we take in, what's the biggest process, or where do we find the biggest gains?
Okay, and there's a second question. Why is there not much take-up of scanning in mail rooms?
And again, I think well actually the most conversations we are having now within the legal sector is about digitising the mailroom. we've got 2 or 3 projects at the moment where exactly that is happening, especially where there are distribution of offices. So multiple offices, certainly either across a county or nationwide, and they're looking at how to either centralise that post or maximise post that comes in from each site and push that into the central mailroom process. So actually, I think because of some of those challenges that we discussed earlier, that's why people are sort of saying, well, how do we adopt that and how easy is that? But as a matter of fact, this is the most focused area where people are trying to capture the post now.
Okay, well, many thanks indeed thank you, Dean, first of all, for taking the time to present that for us. Thank you indeed also to all attendees and for participating in the poll. It's great to get a feel on the pulse for what our audience, various stages they're at. If there are any further questions, then do feel free to get in touch with us offline. That said, thank you very much once again for attending and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you and goodbye.